General Hospital spoilers for next week, July 14th to 18th reveal that beneath the heavy, gray skies of Port Charles, an unexpected storm was quietly unfolding, not one of thunder and lightning, but of heartbreak, desperation, and a child's quiet rebellion against secrets too large for his young heart to carry. Rocco Falconeri, usually obedient, quiet, and tender-hearted, had vanished. His room was empty, his school backpack gone, and his phone left behind as if to signal, in silence, that he had no intention of being found, at least not until he uncovered the truth he had long suspected was being kept from him. Lulu was the first to notice the eerie quietness of their home. Panic rose in her chest like a tidal wave as she searched every corner, calling out Rocco's name, clinging to the hope that he might be hiding or playing a game. But the truth was undeniable. Rocco was gone. Dante, trying to remain composed, contacted the police and launched an immediate search. But what truly unnerved both Lulu and Dante was the sheer inexplicability of it all. Rocco had always been grounded, emotionally sensitive, and above all, deeply connected to his parents. What could have driven him to run away? The answer came in fragments, like puzzle pieces scattered throughout the house. In one of Rocco's notebooks, Lulu found pages scribbled with notes and questions. Names of people connected to a past that Rocco had only experienced through the whispers of adults. At the center of every line was one name, Britt. Britt Westbourne, a woman whom Rocco had adored. She had been a maternal figure in many ways, a source of kindness, joy, and understanding. Her sudden death had left a hole in Rocco's world, one that no adult had truly understood. What Lulu found next froze her blood. Phrases like, "What if Britt isn't dead?" and "Why won't anyone tell me the truth?" were scrawled across Rocco's notebook in increasingly frantic handwriting. He had written dates, tracked conversations, even printed news articles about Britt's supposed death. And in the margins, drawings of her face, her eyes, with haunting captions. "She's still out there, and Jason knows something." While everyone had moved on, or at least pretended to, Rocco had never stopped grieving. But his grief had transformed into something more volatile. Doubt. The circumstances of Britt's death had always been shadowed in secrecy, and now, Rocco was determined to find the answers for himself. He wasn't just running away, he was on a mission. Surveillance footage revealed the next clue. Rocco had been seen at a bus station near the industrial district, dangerously close to where Jason and Anna had begun investigating the laboratory of Professor Hank Dalton. Dalton's lab had long been suspected of conducting illicit experiments. Rumors of biological enhancement, gene manipulation, and even reanimation had circulated among Port Charles's underground circles. And now, that very lab had been broken into. Inside, investigators found small muddy footprints, a child's drawing of a woman with sad eyes taped to the wall, and most chilling of all, one of Britt's old scarves, something that should have been buried or destroyed long ago. Dante and Lulu, devastated and terrified, followed the trail, slowly beginning to piece together the possibility that their son had discovered something no one dared to believe. Jason, under pressure, reluctantly revealed a long-buried truth. Britt's body had never been officially recovered. There had been inconsistencies, whispered theories, but no one had wanted to raise false hope. Yet now, hope was all they had, hope that their son had found something worth believing in. Meanwhile, Rocco, armed only with instinct, love, and the painful clarity of loss, found his way into the heart of something far more dangerous than he understood. Inside the decrepit outskirts of the Dalton facility, hidden behind dusty medical equipment and half-coded files, he discovered a file folder marked Subject B, Active Stasis. He couldn't decode what it meant, but the photograph attached, slightly grainy, but unmistakably Britt, confirmed everything he feared and hoped. She was alive. Or had been. Or was something in between. As he stood frozen in disbelief, someone entered the room. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Rocco, heart pounding, hid behind a rusted cabinet. What he didn't know was that he had just triggered a chain reaction. Whoever was keeping Britt in stasis, or hiding her fate, now knew that a child had breached their security. Rocco was no longer just a runaway, he had become a threat. Back in Port Charles. As Lulu and Dante traced his last known locations and confronted Jason about the stasis file, an emotional storm overtook them. Lulu broke down. Her tears pouring out the grief she had bottled up since Britt's supposed death. Dante, usually the rock in the family, now trembled at the thought of what dangers awaited their son. And yet, they both knew Rocco had done something extraordinary. He had brought truth to the surface. He had done what no adult dared to do. He questioned the narrative, followed his heart, and walked into the darkness in search of light. The entire town began to stir. Anna reopened her inquiry into Dalton's lab. Jason, now burdened by his past choices, vowed to bring Rocco back and uncover what had really happened to Britt. Even Sonny, upon learning the truth, offered his resources and protection. What had begun as a boy's personal quest had grown into a seismic shift that threatened to uncover one of the darkest secrets in Port Charles history. And through it all, Rocco, somewhere out there, remained brave and relentless, following the threads of a truth that might save Britt, or destroy everything. Under the increasingly suffocating weight of the unfolding chaos in Port Charles, Jason found himself trapped in a web of tension that seemed to tighten with every passing hour. Professor Hank Dalton's shadow loomed larger than ever, casting doubt and danger across every corner of the city. With each new revelation unearthed inside her secret laboratory, Jason and Anna began to realize that the situation was escalating far beyond the boundaries of traditional threat. Dalton was not just conducting unethical experiments, she was manipulating life, rewriting biology, and dismantling the natural laws that governed their world. Time was no longer a luxury. Swift, decisive action was required before the consequences of Dalton's ambitions bled irreversibly into the lives of the innocent. Yet as the adults scrambled to contain the bioethical nightmare, another storm raged quietly, dangerously beneath the surface, a personal crisis threatening to erupt between two young women whose lives had become more entangled than anyone understood. Emma and Jocelyn, both navigating their own darkness, were now spiraling toward a collision that neither Anna nor Jason saw coming. Emma had been trying for months to rebuild herself in the aftermath of trauma, of loss, of isolation. Her return to Port Charles was supposed to bring healing, stability, and perhaps even a renewed connection to the family that had once given her strength. But instead, it brought her closer to secrets that had no business surfacing. Jocelyn, on the other hand, had been dancing on the edge of control. Her connection to Vaughn, her involvement in a series of covert operations and manipulation of WSB assets, had twisted her judgment and alienated her from the girl she once was. Her obsession with completing the mission, and avenging a version of the past she could not fully articulate, was now manifesting in choices that placed everyone around her in danger, including Emma. Emma had begun to suspect something was wrong. The way Jocelyn lingered near restricted areas of the Dalton investigation, the way she seemed to know too much, and the moments of icy detachment that replaced their once warm friendship, all signs that something deeper was unraveling. Anna saw it too. She recognized in Emma's silent frustration the same helplessness she had once felt when secrets had torn her family apart. Jason, occupied with Dalton's growing threat, remained unaware that the battle wasn't only taking place in laboratories and safe houses, it was also raging in Emma's heart. Emma's confrontation with Jocelyn came suddenly, emotionally, and with the force of months of unspoken tension. Words once buried under civility exploded into accusations. Jocelyn's eyes burned with betrayal, while Emma's voice trembled with a need for truth. It wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about identity. About who they were becoming in the shadows of their parents and mentors. And about the dangerous possibility that Jocelyn was hiding something that could compromise everything Jason and Anna had worked for. Jason, caught between the accelerating war with Dalton and the emotional implosion between Emma and Jocelyn, found himself facing a level of pressure he hadn't known since the darkest days of his life. He had to choose where to focus, neutralizing the existential threat Dalton posed to Port Charles, or protecting the fractured young lives beginning to fray in the crossfire. What he didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that these two fronts were not separate at all. Jocelyn's actions were connected to Dalton more intimately than anyone knew. And Emma's descent into emotional instability was not just a side effect, but a symptom of a deeper corruption spreading from within. The fallout was inevitable. One misstep from Jocelyn triggered a lockdown at the WSB field office, leading Anna to question whether they had a mole, or worse, a saboteur. Emma withdrew completely, refusing to speak to anyone but Jason, who now bore the burden of not only saving Port Charles from Dalton's experimentation, but also from the personal devastation brewing inside the very people he was trying to protect. Everything was unraveling. And the clock was ticking. Trina had always believed that love could survive almost anything: distance, fear, uncertainty. But what she hadn't accounted for was betrayal cloaked in the illusion of loyalty. 4 months. She had welcomed Kai into her world, letting him occupy the most sacred corners of her life. She had defended him against skepticism from Curtis and Portia, against the silent reservations of her closest friends, and even against her own inner doubts. But all of that collapsed the moment she discovered the truth, that Kai had been quietly supplying information to Drew, helping him build a case or campaign, or whatever twisted strategy he had in mind, by undermining the very people Trina loved. It wasn't just that Kai had lied. It was that he had done so while pretending to protect her. The realization shattered her, because for the first time in years, she had allowed herself to trust someone new. And now, that trust had been weaponized. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't come with a dramatic confession or a public humiliation. It crept in through quiet signs, odd gaps in conversation, sudden changes in demeanor, awkward deflections when certain names came up. Trina had chalked them up to stress, or maybe insecurity. But deep down, a part of her knew that something was wrong. She just hadn't wanted to believe it. When the truth finally emerged, it wasn't from Kai's mouth. It came from a secure server accessed through a slip-up in Drew's carelessness. A set of encrypted messages Trina intercepted while helping Marshall with archival work that intersected with Drew's public development project. At first, she thought it was a coincidence. But as she dug deeper, the pieces fell into place: dates, locations, and insights Kai had no business knowing unless he had been actively feeding them to Drew. Information about Curtis' whereabouts, about Portia's legal conversations, and even notes about Sasha's public behavior. Her stomach turned when she realized he had also documented private moments with her, her anxieties, her fears, her conversations, everything used as leverage. The betrayal was intimate, precise, and unforgivable. She didn't wait. That same night, she went to the place where it had all started for them, the Port Charles Art Gallery where they'd first met. Kai was already there, waiting for her, perhaps sensing the storm that was about to descend. When she walked in, the air between them was thick with unspoken truths. Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. She asked him plainly if the messages were his. Kai didn't deny it. He didn't even try. He only lowered his head and said he had his reasons. He tried to explain how Drew had cornered him, how he thought he was doing the right thing by keeping an eye on things, how he believed it might help protect Trina from a larger war. But every word he spoke was another wound. Another cut into the already bleeding trust she had placed in him. His reasons didn't matter. The damage was already done. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply said goodbye and walked away, leaving him behind in a room filled with unfinished canvases and the echoes of a love that never had a chance to survive. Kai stood alone, staring at the doorway long after she had left. It was only then that he realized the full extent of what he had done. In choosing allegiance to Drew, he had betrayed not just Trina, but himself. Whatever Drew had promised him, power, access, validation, it was now worthless. Because the only person whose trust had ever meant anything to him had turned her back, and she wasn't coming back. Meanwhile, Trina returned home to a family already under siege. Curtis and Portia were fighting to hold their marriage together amid legal battles, media attacks, and constant surveillance from Drew's team. Trina didn't tell them everything, not yet, but she knew she would. They deserved to know who Kai really was. And more importantly, she needed to do something with the fire that now raged inside her. Her heartbreak had turned to purpose. She wouldn't let this betrayal break her. She would use it. She began compiling what she knew, documenting Kai's communications, tracing the link back to Drew, and quietly building a record that might one day bring justice. Not just for herself, but for everyone Drew had hurt. Because it was never just about love. It was about dignity, legacy, and truth. Across town, Drew continued to move forward with his agenda. Unaware that the walls were slowly closing in. He still believed Kai was loyal. He still thought he had Trina in the dark. But he had underestimated her, and soon he would realize that the quietest storms often do the most damage. As for Kai, he tried to make amends, sending messages, writing apologies, asking to meet. But Trina didn't respond. Not because she hated him. Not even because she was angry. But because she understood now that some betrayals leave scars too deep to heal. And no matter how much she had once loved him, she would never let herself be used again. Her heart might have been broken, but her spirit had never been stronger. And as she stood beside Curtis and Portia once more, ready to face whatever Drew might throw their way, she knew she wasn't just a victim of betrayal, she was the beginning of the end for those who thought they could manipulate her family and walk away unscathed. And that made her more dangerous than any of them had ever expected. In the dimly lit corner of Charlie's pub, time seemed to stop for a moment too long. A breath suspended in the air between desire and disaster. Ava leaned closer, her voice low and tinged with the whiskey that had not dulled her defiance. Cody met her eyes with a mixture of reckless attraction and guilty hesitation. It should have been a mistake they didn't repeat. But it happened again, this time slower, longer, more deliberate. And just like that, their lips met in a second kiss charged with everything that should have remained buried. But they weren't alone. Molly stood in the hallway, a file folder in her arms. Her expression frozen in disbelief as she caught sight of Ava's hand on Cody's cheek, and Cody's fingers tangled in Ava's hair. The kiss wasn't innocent. It was messy, emotional, dangerous. It was a betrayal not only of Christina, but of every fragile thread holding the Davis family together. And in that instant, Molly's heart didn't just sink, it detonated. The kiss wasn't just a kiss. It was a spark. A spark that ignited a firestorm across Port Charles that no one could contain. Because Molly wasn't just a bystander. She was a witness. A witness who carried inside her months of guilt over her complicated feelings for Cody, the unresolved tension with Christina, and the simmering suspicion that Ava, always Ava, would be the woman to break the family from within. The look on Molly's face wasn't just betrayal, it was confirmation. She had been right to worry. Right to mistrust. And now that truth scorched everything she thought she could ignore. When she fled from the hallway, her thoughts were no longer organized or restrained. They were chaos. She didn't know where to go, so she went where the pain could scream the loudest, home. Home. Where Christina waited with unshakable optimism about her complicated friendship with Ava and her hesitant flirtation with Cody. Christina, who still defended Ava's intentions. Christina, who still believed Cody was just trying to be kind. And when Molly walked through that door, she shattered that illusion in one sentence: I saw them kiss. That was all it took. Christina's world broke open with a violent silence. At first, she didn't speak. Her eyes darted back and forth between Molly and the disbelief thickening in the air. Her mind tried to reject the truth, but the look on Molly's face, the fury, the heartbreak, the certainty, was undeniable. Christina didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood up and walked away. The silence she left behind was louder than any explosion. Meanwhile, Ava returned to her penthouse, unaware of the chaos now spiraling around her. But Cody wasn't so lucky. Guilt gripped him instantly the moment Ava turned away, her lips still tasting of danger and doom. He had tried to convince himself that the kiss meant nothing, but the truth gnawed at him. This wasn't some heat-of-the-moment lapse. It was something more. Something real. Something he couldn't explain or justify. And now, it wasn't just his secret. It was out. Molly, torn between loyalty to her sister and the need to protect her from a relationship built on lies, faced a moral crisis that left her questioning everything. Should she expose Ava publicly and destroy Christina's trust? Should she confront Cody and demand accountability? Or should she step back and allow Christina to face the truth on her own terms? Every option led to destruction. Every path led to a firestorm. But the fire had already begun. The next morning, Christina didn't show up to her center. She didn't answer her phone. She went silent. Dante received a quiet call from Molly, who feared her sister had gone somewhere to escape. Meanwhile, Ava sensed something wrong the moment she saw the headlines. Cody Bell's secret kiss with Ava Jerome, source close to family confirms. Ava froze. Someone had leaked the story. Her worst fear realized. But it wasn't just her reputation at risk, it was her relationship with Christina, with the Davis family, with the small ounce of peace she had begun to build. All gone. As the public fallout began, Cody found himself bombarded. Sasha gave him a look of utter disgust when he walked into General Hospital. Even Maxie, who had always defended him, kept her distance. Christina didn't respond to his messages. Dante, conflicted between being a brother and a cop, warned him to stay away. And Ava? Ava locked her doors, shut her blinds, and poured herself a drink. Knowing full well this might be the end of whatever redemption she once thought she could claim. And yet, in the ashes of the disaster, something darker began to form, an obsession. Christina, reeling from betrayal, withdrew. She stopped answering calls, stopped opening up. Ava began to worry not just about her relationship with Christina but for her mental health. But the irony wasn't lost on anyone. Ava, the woman who shattered Christina's trust, now feared for her stability. Cody, now disgraced, found himself drawn further into Ava's world. Unable to pull away from the chaos they had created together. But for Molly, the story was different. The betrayal had unlocked something inside her, a ruthless clarity. She was done being passive. Done waiting for others to destroy what little peace she had. She began to investigate Ava's finances, her connections, and her past. She started speaking with Sonny, subtly probing. And for the first time in years, Molly wasn't just a lawyer. She was a threat. A Davis woman with nothing left to lose and everything to burn. In the end, Ava and Cody's kiss was not just a scandal. It was a declaration. A signal that the old rules were gone and that desire, betrayal, and revenge were now the only currency that mattered in Port Charles. And as the days turned into weeks, the fallout would stretch far beyond Molly and Christina. Because in this town, no kiss is ever forgotten. And every secret, eventually, demands a price.